Hello everyone and welcome to this week's ITSM webinar. My name is Nick Hundozi, the PECB organizer of this webinar, and the guest for today is Mohamed Shalaby, a PECB trainer and partner from Egypt. Today we will talk about the common ITIL implementation mistakes in the scope of ISO 20000. But before we start, in case you have any questions or comments, please submit them by using the question box in the right-hand control panel, and Mr. Shalaby will answer to them accordingly. Please, Mohamed, you may start the presentation.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I just want to make sure that everybody is hearing me well and can see the presentation slides. So if there is any problem, please report on the chat box. So our today's presentation will be focusing on the implementation mistakes or issues, I would say, for the ITIL framework in the scope of achieving ISO 20000 certification. So I would like to start with a myth that ITIL is not working for all the organization levels or all the organization styles, but this is actually not true. Before we can start, we want to clean out this myth that actually the organizations and the people implementing the ITIL framework are those who fail. To be really successful in implementing the ITIL framework, ITIL requires actually accountability for all levels. It requires personal accountability, to your colleagues, accountability to the department you are working for, and accountability towards the customer we are serving. So achieving such accountabilities, then we can achieve the success in the implementation of the ITIL framework. We have enumerated in these slides common 12 issues or mistakes that are commonly done in the implementation of the ITIL framework in different organizations, and we will go through them in this set of slides. The first issue is the lack of support from the top management and the lack of buy-in from those top management. And that way, nothing can be achieved actually without such support. You will find that many issues and obstacles will appear on the surface, and no support from the management will push things to move forward. So no visible solutions will be provided, and such issue can be solved by presenting a solid business case for the implementation of the ITIL framework. Without the support of the top management, I believe that the ITIL implementation would be a very, very hard exercise. The second issue we have is that the existing processes and procedures are not aligned together. For example, if the implementation team or the consultant brings a template of process or something to use in the implementation, while we already had a procedures implemented in the company we have, they are post maybe achieving two different targets or two different goals. And for example, we would give an example for the incident management, that the process states that at a different at a specific point we need to check the knowledge base, for example, and while the procedure states that we need at this point to escalate to the next level of support. Those are contradicting process and procedures. So we need to align both things, and we need to align as well to the policy, and which we will come along in another point during this presentation as well. And this issue could be solved by using the ITIL Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle of implementation. And it can also be rectified and improved by taking the feedback from the people into account. I mean, the people who are working on the activities of the process or the activities of the procedures, their feedback is very, very important, and that is another point during this presentation as well. The third point we have is that some processes don't exist, and some other processes are not being actually used. Some organizations actually say, okay, we are working on operations, 90% of our focus, then we will focus on the operations processes, and we will not go through any of the design, transition, strategy, etc. But at this stage, actually, I would say that ITIL and as well as ISO 20K is like a puzzle, a full puzzle of a picture. And each process has its own specific part of this puzzle. And this puzzle is working together like the processes. Processes are working together. If some is missing, then the whole picture would be missing. And to avoid such an issue, there should be a good process governance in place. An internal audit program would help as well. The management reviews would work for such an issue. You would spot such issues if any of those controls are in place, and accordingly, the continual improvement actions would be implemented in a timely manner. The fourth point we have is that we try to do too much of the work too soon. We want to achieve the ISO certificate, we have a deadline, and we need to implement the framework within, let's say, a couple of months. It's something like running before we learn how to walk first. Trying actually to implement too many processes at once is like doing different jobs very badly rather than doing a single good job. Actually, we need to focus on the most important things to achieve our certificate first, and then we can implement the rest of the framework of the ITIL if needed. Otherwise, we can wait until we need those processes to be implemented. But anyway, we need to have a definite plan. We need to measure each step we go through the implementation, and we need to define our success factors and success goals to measure targets against. The next point would be that many of the staff implementing the ITIL and working in the implementation project, they do not understand the difference between what is policy, what is the process, and the procedures, and different work instructions. Actually, this is very common in companies and organizations, because mostly process and procedures are interchangeably used in the acronyms and language of the organizations. So in the implementation team, you need to identify what is a process, what is a procedure, what is a policy, give a clear definition for each of them, and make an awareness program, training programs, and measure the competencies of the employees working on the implementation project. And then after those awareness programs, you need to evaluate the awareness programs, what we have achieved during those awareness programs. Here we have an example of the policy, which is a main guidelines of what we need to achieve. For example, we need to have an internet security in our company. We need to have a cyber resilience or cyber security in our company. We need to have our product delivered to the customer within target time, and so on. The process would be a more fine-grained for these guidelines. It's more like an activity composition of those guidelines. For example, we need to define who will do what. So we put in this example that employees will prepare an order for delivery while the managers monitor the process. We put here roles and responsibilities in the process mainly. And in the procedure, we more fine-grain the process activities. We put which employee will do what exactly. So the employee in this function will fill the orders of this category, or the incidents of this category, or work on those categories, and this team will be working on the other categories or other line of business, etc. So we need to take this into consideration. We need to have a common baseline for all the organization talking the same language, because when the auditor for the ISO 20K come in the company, he need to make sure that everybody understands what is the policy, what is the process, what is the procedure, and that definition is aligned with the standard definition. The standard of the ISO 20K definition. Next point we have is that we too often we have too much reliance on the technology we have in the company. We are not saying that the implementation of the technology is not important. It's very crucial for the success achievement for our ITIL implementation in the first place, and the ISO achievement, ISO 20K achievement accordingly. But this is not the main focus for the IT service management mainly. In the first place, the ISO 20K framework is called Service Management System. So it's mainly focusing on the service management part, not on the IT part. While the IT service management is having a balance between both, on IT and service management. So when actually the implementation team focus more on the IT implementation more than the service management part, then most of the time the implementation is gone beyond the expectation of the people using this technology, because it would be more sophisticated for them. It would be more hard to use those tools and the different tools, etc. When the employees and people who are using those tools say that they dislike any tool or any technology they are using, it's often the implementation of this. It's often the implementation issue of this tool or technology that causes the issue. So as we said, we need to more focus on and emphasize on the service management part more than the IT implementation and the IT part. Though that technology is very, very important and crucial for the success of such implementation of the framework, we need to have an automation whenever. We need to have an automation whenever we have an opportunity for automation in order to achieve the maximum effectiveness and efficiency that we could. So the next point we have for the staff members for the implementation team may be reluctant to admit that they are not understanding what is actually required from them to do. Maybe we engage some of the implementation teams, the functions who are used to work normal incident management or monitoring activities or operations in general. So they are not aware and they are not understanding what the strategy vision needs, what the design needs are, what the transition should follow. So sometimes the members of the implementation team, they are reluctant to admit such lack of understanding. So in order to actually tackle such an issue, we need to have a solid training and awareness programs, and for all the employees, to have all the employees on the same level of understanding of the implementation requirements. And we shall evaluate such awareness and training programs after the finish of those programs in order to make sure that we achieved what we intended to. Also, we might have insufficient effort placed on selling the concepts and benefits of ITIL to the employees, that's another point, that the employees are not very keen to know what are the requirements needed from them. So we need to put much effort in selling the concept and benefits in those training and awareness programs to the employees. What is behind, what the benefit behind what we are doing for the employees and for the whole organization and for the business in general. And actually, as a result, for this point would be a lack of commitment and resistance to change if it kept as is. And we can tackle that, as we just said, through the awareness programs and the training and evaluation after. So Nick, we are almost halfway. So if you have any questions I can answer, then...
No, not yet, not yet. We can take them at the end. So
okay.
Just continue with the presentation and then we will see.
Okay, we will keep at that. Okay, sure. Okay. Our next point is that we may put much emphasis on the easy stuff. For example, we are working as operation organization. We are many of the organizations are working with incident management, problem management, monitoring, event management, access control, etc. Then they are putting all the effort and the emphasis on that easy stuff. They are not taking a look on the rest of the framework, on the strategy, for example, the financial management, on the other parts of the design for the availability management, the capacity management. They are not looking at the continual improvement. And such an issue actually, back to the Basel acronym we used, then making that way would be missing a lot of the whole picture of the ITIL framework, which will be reflected at the end of the day to the ISO 20K certification, which might fail due to the lack of some existing processes that are needed, something like reporting management or something. So putting a much emphasis on the easy stuff is not the right thing to do. You need to balance between what you are doing and what is actually needed. The easiest stuff isn't easy to achieve. It's a quick win. We are doing it. We are experts in that. So that's okay. But we need to study what we need to do in order to achieve the other parts of the framework or the standard after. Then we have the next point regarding the consultants. Many organizations are using consultants, and actually those consultants are added value to the organization for the implementation of the ITIL framework and achieving the ISO 20K certificate. But most of the time those consultants are badly managed, which means that the knowledge transfer part of the consultation to the local employees, local staff in the organization is not correctly done. And mainly the consultants are concentrating on the higher value added activity, which means that they are mainly concentrated on the implementation of the framework, but after the consultation is done, then no one in the organization knows how things are working. No one in the organization knows what is where. No one knows what if we need to improve something, what we shall do. We will bring the consultant, or we shall implement that ourselves, and if we are going to implement it ourselves, how we could manage that. Such knowledge transfer from the consultant part is very crucial to the very crucial for managing the consultants. We are paying, the organizations are paying high salaries for consultants in order to implement and to train their employees how to do things after the consultant finishes the job. So a proper management of consultation services are needed in the organizations if the organizations will use a consultation services for the implementation of the ITIL framework and the achievement of the ISO 20K certificate after. Our next point would be the measurements. Not everything is recorded or measured. This is an issue that especially the performance of identified improvements are not measured. Most of the time we identify some of the improvements we need to achieve, and those achievements are not measured. We need to measure where we need first to put where do we want to go, where do we want this improvement to achieve, and then we need to measure the improvement if the improvement achieved what is intended to achieve or not. And measurement is a critical part of the continual improvement activities in the organization, which is normally masked, and that is actually tackled in the ISO 20K certificate for the ISO 20K standard through the reporting process in the standard. The reporting process is mainly for reporting the measurements. For reporting the measurements of the achievements or different processes, and reporting the achievements of different services and the key performance indicators for everything. So measurement is crucial throughout the life cycle of the implementation project, from the very start beginning until the continual improvement for the implementation. The next point would be that the continual improvement feedback channels would not be very much clear. For example, if I need to report something wrong in the process, or something that need to be corrected or improved in the procedures, where shall I go? This might not be very clear, and that should be defined very clearly in the process or in different set of documents stating that continual improvement channels would be 1 to 3. And for all the employees, all the stakeholders, or the process owners know that they have such inputs for the improvements, and they need to put such outputs for the improvements. The continual improvement actually is a very, very high value added to the organization and to the framework, and it's very critical part of the ITIL implementation and the ISO achievement actually, because whenever we have an initial audit or an internal audit, for example, and we need to cover some of the gaps we identified during the internal audit program, then we go through the continual improvement process. We go through the continual improvement cycle to cover such gaps or area of concerns we have. So the last point we have is that we are not identifying success stories and communicating them back to the business. Communication actually is, in general, is a critical, very critical part of any process, any framework, any standard. And ITIL implementation, ISO 20K is not an exception. So communication is very critical cornerstone of the process, the whole process of the implementation. And this specific point is saying that we are not highlighting the success stories, and we are not communicating them back to the business. We are not communicating them back to the internal organizations. We are not communicating them to the employees. So in this point, eventually, we are reminding ourselves that we are responsible for adding the value to the business. We are responsible for adding value to the customers we are serving through the ITIL framework, and accordingly through the ISO 20K standard. And we have to make those achievements visible to the business, and to make sure that the business knows that we are adding some value to them. Then in order to do that, communication is a solution. Different communication channels can be used. We can use newsletters, we can use emails, we can use bulletin boards. A lot of communication channels can be used. Different communication channels can be used. We can use meetings as well for the communicating the success stories. Any communication channel can be used, but we need to focus on such stories. We need to communicate them to the business, making sure that the business are appreciating what value we are adding to them. And that concludes the 12 points we are discussing. Mainly those are the major 12 points that I came through during my experience in implementing ITIL framework or assessing ITIL frameworks to achieve the ISO certificate. And through my readings, I have found that those are the main common 12 mistakes that are leading to a bad implementation of the framework, or let's say a failure at the end to achieve the ISO 20K certificate was due to one of those 12 issues that has been enumerated here. So that's it for me, Nick. If you have any questions, please.
Yes, thanks, Mohamed, for this great presentation. I forwarded you 2 questions. Did you get them, or do you want me to read them?
Yes, I have the first one here. When implementing a service management system, shall we start with ITIL or ISO 20K?
Yeah.
Actually, it is recommended to start with ITIL, but it's not mandatory to start with ITIL. We can start with ISO 20K, but the ISO 20K in its implementation guidelines, they recommend that we start with a framework. They don't specifically say that we have to start, but they recommend that we start with a framework, because starting with a framework is more flexible than starting with standard. Because the framework we can use, for example, the ITIL framework, we can use some of the processes, some of the operations processes. We can say, first of all, we can take some of the puzzle and implement them. Let's say that the left lower corner of the puzzle, we can use this side of puzzle and we implement then after we have time to implement the rest. But for the ISO 20K, it's a standard. So we need to achieve the standard. Then we are time restricted somehow. So it's recommended to implement some framework, maybe MOF framework, ITIL framework, COPIT, whatever framework we are used to, and then we implement ISO accordingly after. But that is the recommendation, is to implement the framework first and then the ISO 20K. But of course, it's doable to start right away from the ISO 20K standard. So it's up to the preference of the organization, but at the end of the day, it's recommended to start with a framework because it's more flexible for the implementation. The second question is, can ITIL and ISO 20K work together? Yes, of course, they actually are built upon each other. For example, for clarification, ITIL is not an organization certification, which means that no organization in the world can state that we are ITIL compliant or we are ITIL certified something. No, ITIL is a personal certification. Employees can achieve ITIL certifications, but not organizations. On the contrary, ISO 20K is both, actually. Someone can achieve the ISO 20K auditor certification, for example, ISO 20K implementer certification, and the organization itself can be audited against the ISO 20K standard. So yes, both things, ITIL and ISO 20K can work definitely together, and it's recommended, again, it's recommended that they work together.
Okay, Mohamed, we have no other questions for the moment, so thanks once again for this great presentation. I want to thank all attendees as well for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the webinar. So please also don't forget to check our website and our social media channels for our upcoming webinars. Thanks once again and have a nice day.
Thank you, Nick. Have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.